And building on a number of themes that you've shared already, Bill. I was just reminded that that we've been pleased to be a member of your skills validation network that is bringing together a number of players in the space and really looking and trying to tackle that wicked challenges around how do you recognize skills in a meaningful way and share that. And one of the mechanisms, as a design lab, and it was great the number of design thinking examples that you gave in terms of the lab's history. So I know the lab gets involved in a number of different initiatives around standards for the exchange of information and in terms of promoting skills visibility. And one of the many admirable things about the lab is that you are often leading the way and pushing and challenging assumptions and models. So are there particular standards that you try to weave in, or and do
Yeah.
you feel those standards are helping?
So yeah, you're in terms of talking about specifics, because I'm someone who loves standards and appreciates them, and I've used them in other contexts. And uh, you know, I want to be respectful of the work that's being done in standards, but I think they're emergent in this space, and to the degree that they're more than that, I wouldn't do justice to like which one or
Yeah,
ones or follow this one or that one, because I know in when I was doing that in other spaces, it mattered a lot which, what the name of it was.
yeah, yeah.
But I will say that the work of around digital wallets
Mm.
is a big deal. I think for a few different reasons. One is if we're gathering all these skills, there needs to be a place for them. And there needs to be some sort of portability for the user and ability to essentially express those in ways that are meaningful to them. In the same way, you might tailor a resume, or you tailor a cover letter to tell a story about yourself.
Mm.
Well, how do you actually, with a different kind of artifact, not only have all that stuff validated in a one place, but also tell a story about yourself? Another thing is, in the US, there's a lot of aversion to kind of a national identity,
Okay,
record. And
right.
it's kind of weird. I think there's some, I won't go into like why I think these things exist, but they do. And it's made it hard to have kind of a national record of like who you are and what you can do. But it's starting to happen, like if not at the federal level, at the state level,
Mm.
where states are putting out wallets for things like, when COVID was here, your COVID record, and and other immunizations, and your driver's license. So my Colorado is where my daughter went to school at one point in Colorado, and the My Colorado wallet was a digital wallet that she could download to her phone, and it had a whole bunch of stuff about her. And the skills work is a little bit behind. It's not the easiest thing to put into wallets and to use, but that's coming.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
won't say there's one standard. There's a bunch of different
Mm.
standards. Um, I guess, there's the open badging is probably the one that's closest, that I know a little bit about.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I was at Pearson, we had the Acclaim system, which then got acquired by Credly and then got reacquired back by Pearson. And
Right.
I know they're on a journey around those standards, and I think they're seeking greater. As a private company, you have to wrestle with issues of your strategy and interoperability and all that stuff. But I think they're moving in that domain. Other folks like Badger
Mm.
are already living in the space of kind of the open badges, so that one badge system and another badge system can interoperate and share your information. And I think all of that is really in support of empowering the learner, so that it's not about an entity, a corporation or an institution owning your information, but it's about you owning your information and then making sense of where it makes the most sense for you. So we think those things are important. but I want to take a step back and just talk about the concept of standards in general and why they're important in this ecosystem. It's a pretty messy ecosystem. The U.S. in particular, again, you got 50 states plus federal plus other jurisdictions, and then you have so each one of those is sort of its own market.
Mhm.
Um, and in each one of those own markets, there's different policies that drive how funding works, drives how uh, what kind of programs are supported. And in some of those states, you have a lot of metropolitan areas. So there's a certain type of work that shows up in those kind of areas. In other states, it's like Australia. It's like, there's a wide open mass, like there's no people. There are probably more prairie dogs than there are people, or kangaroos, whatever, joeys. Um, that the US version of that. So how do you scale something in a rural community?
Yeah.
And what do those programs look like? So there's a lot of kind of variability, and without some common standards, it's very hard to coalesce momentum in the sector to really move innovation at the speed and scales that it needs to. Uh, so we are focused on a few different things around standards. One of them is, and these are, I would say, our contributions to having standard vocabulary and standard concepts. I don't want to push it as like this is the EDL standard because
Okay.
I think
Sure.
we're trying to be more inclusive and including ourselves and what other work is going on as well. But we are doing work, in our micro pathways. We have over 100 community colleges. There are fewer than 1,000 in the U.S. and have 100 that we're actively working with right now. There's another 100 in the pipeline who want to work with us. So that sort of creates a standards-like dynamic of a number of different institutions all doing the same or similar things. And in that work, we not only do work with those schools to build these micro pathways, which are essentially a blueprint for stackable credential programs that can be for credit or non-credit, that can people can weave in and out of, which is to say start and stop. They get something in a year or less. It articulates to a job that's in demand in their
Mm.
area, all those types of things. So there's that blueprint, and they're called lots of different things around the country, but they all sort of have this common piece. And we have communities of practice that we build in support of that, so that there are birds of a feather who are all kind of coming together and supporting one another as they innovate in this space. The other main place where we're doing this, is in two other places. One is in skills visibility, which is what we call kind of the wallet space. So we talked
Okay.
about wallets. And then the third one is you mentioned this sort of Center for Skills Validation that EdElex is part of, that um, we've got uh, a notion that if we're going to have skills-based credentials, one of the challenges right now is there are actually like 1 million micro credentials. I think they're in this system called Credential Engine, which is another system that has some sort of standardization around a credential registry. We support that, so want that's another one maybe to put on the list. But but with those 1 million credentials, that's way too many for any employer to really understand, like
Yeah.
which one and which ones are good and how do I
Yes.
make sense of all that. So there needs to be some sort of quality criteria that comes, on top of that. There's some quality initiatives like the Equos initiative that JFF has been pushing forward. But there's also this need, I think, that's for sort of ex post quality, like what programs have shown that they have success, that they have successful outcomes. But I think there's another way of defining quality, which is also matters, which is design quality. Like, is something
Yeah,
designed right?
right.
Right. And if it's designed right and has the right design characteristics, then it intrinsically has quality. And I think that's an important thing to do for people who are designing new things because the feedback loop is too late if you wait to see outcomes to know whether you did it right. So we believe one of the key pieces of uh, quality for skills-based credentials is a coherent, consistent, understood way of measuring skills. And we call those skill validators. And they can show up in lots of different ways. They could be um, an assessment or a mastery challenge or
Mm,
simulation that someone goes through. It can be an attestation at the end of an internship or an apprenticeship that someone says, I attest that these things have happened. And but in all these different cases, there needs to be some common sensibility about what these things are, what they're attesting to, what they're referencing. If they're drawing from skills taxonomies, to have clear kind of referenceability to those.
right.
If they're generating new kinds of skills, there's probably something around there, and also the functionality of it to be able to help a learner, earner, tell their story. So all of those things that they plug into wallets. So we don't know what the end game is with what skill validators are, but
Mm,
we've sort of flown that flag, and as we've started flying it, before we've even finished defining it, people are coming to us. We have dozens of organizations coming to us and saying, we think we're building skill validators and we'd like to talk with you about it and try to figure out what you guys have learned. So we've got a whole research program that's advancing the state of the art around that. And we also have this Center for Skills Validation Network that you guys
mm.
are a part of that is moving this kind of work forward. So we think, probably in the next year or so, I would suspect it's going to have enough traction where we could start saying some things definitively about what skill validation is. And we already have some papers around that. So in some ways we've already said it. But
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
at the level that we really want to start, shouting it from the rooftops.
That's brilliant, Bill.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we love talking about is the concept of giving learner earners a voice for their skills. And we commissioned some market research a few years back that identified that of more than 1,000 American college graduates, only a third felt comfortable voicing their own skills during their first job search. But it's not just at that learner earner perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, as the work you've just described is so important to ensure that the educational institutions and other organizations are thinking about it with the end in mind, and what skills, what capabilities, what competencies are they helping develop in those learners.